you ever notice how the people who got called paranoid 10 years ago are now the ones everyone's quietly nodding along with? Like, we've all got that one person in our lives who was talking about mass surveillance or corporate manipulation back when everyone else was rolling their eyes. And now? Now we're all casually accepting that our phones are listening to us, that governments were actually running insane experiments on citizens, and that, yeah, maybe some of those crazy conspiracy theories were just early pattern recognition. There's something deeply uncomfortable about that shift, because it means we have to confront a kind of cognitive dissonance we really don't want to deal with. What if being skeptical of authority wasn't paranoia? What if it was just seeing clearly? Here's the thing about conspiracy theories that turn out to be true. They fundamentally challenge our psychological need for a stable, trustworthy world. We're wired to believe that the systems around us are generally working in our favor, or at least not actively working against us. It's called the just world hypothesis. This deep-seated need to believe that good things happen to good people, and that those in power mostly mean well. When that gets shattered, when we find out that, yeah, the CIA really did dose unsuspecting citizens with LSD, or that tobacco companies knew their products caused cancer for decades and lied about it, something breaks in our basic trust architecture. And the uncomfortable truth? Most people would rather call someone crazy than confront that break. Let's start with MKUltra, because if there's ever been a conspiracy theory that sounds absolutely bananas until you read the declassified documents, it's this one. For those who don't know, MKUltra was a CIA program that ran from the 1950s to the 1970s, focused on mind control experiments. They dosed people with LSD without their knowledge or consent. They conducted experiments on prisoners, mental patients, and just random citizens. They were literally trying to figure out if they could control human behavior through drugs and psychological torture. For decades, if you suggested the government was running secret mind control experiments, you'd be laughed out of the room. You'd be the person at the party everyone slowly backs away from. And then in 1975, the Church Committee and Rockefeller Commission investigated, documents got declassified, and suddenly it was all confirmed. Real, documented, undeniable. The psychological impact of learning something like this is profound. It's not just, oh, that's messed up. It's a fundamental recalibration of what you thought was possible, what you thought the boundaries were. Then there's the Tuskegee Syphilis Study. For 40 years, from 1932 to 1972, the U.S. Public Health Service told black men in Alabama they were receiving free health care. What they were actually doing was studying the progression of untreated syphilis. These men were never told they had syphilis. They were never treated, even after penicillin became the standard cure in 1947. They were just observed, studied, left to suffer and die so researchers could take notes. For decades, if you were a black person saying, "I don't trust the medical establishment, I think they experiment on us," you'd be dismissed as paranoid, as someone stuck in the past, as someone who couldn't move on. Except it wasn't paranoia. It was lived experience and justified distrust based on ongoing reality. The study didn't end because of internal ethics. It ended because a whistleblower leaked it to the press. The psychological term here is gaslighting, but on a systemic, institutional level. Being told your fears are irrational when they're actually based on pattern recognition is a special kind of crazy-making. Here's where it gets even more interesting, though. COINTELPRO, the FBI's program to surveil, infiltrate, discredit, and disrupt domestic political organizations. If you were a civil rights activist in the 1960s saying, "I think the FBI is targeting us. I think they're trying to destroy our movement from the inside," that wasn't paranoia. That was accurate threat assessment. The FBI literally had a program dedicated to it. They infiltrated groups, spread false information, created internal conflicts, and in some cases, may have been involved in the assassinations of activists. Documents proving this came out in 1971 when activists broke into an FBI office and stole files. Before that, you were a conspiracy theorist. After that, you were just describing documented reality. The psychology here is fascinating because it reveals how power protects itself through dismissal. The most effective way to neutralize someone exposing the truth isn't to silence them directly. It's to make everyone else think they're unreliable, unhinged, paranoid. What about corporate conspiracies? Big Tobacco knew cigarettes caused cancer as early as the 1950s. They had the research. They knew. And then they spent decades funding counter-research, paying scientists to muddy the waters, creating doubt where none should exist, targeting teenagers with advertising, and denying everything. If you said tobacco companies are lying about the safety of their products in 1960, you'd be fighting against an entire apparatus designed to make you look foolish. The psychological concept here is manufactured doubt. When there's a truth that's inconvenient to powerful interests, you don't have to disprove it. You just have to make people uncertain. You fund studies that contradict the real findings. You platform the one dissenting scientist and ignore the 99 others. You make it seem like there's a debate when there really isn't. And it works. For decades it worked. Or how about NSA mass surveillance? Edward Snowden revealed in 2013 what many people had been saying for years, that the U.S. government was conducting mass surveillance on its own citizens and people around the world, collecting phone records, internet data, everything. Before Snowden, if you said, "The government is watching everything we do online," you were the tinfoil hat person. After Snowden, it was just acknowledged fact. But here's the psychological twist. Even after it was proven true, most people just shrugged. That's the adaptation piece. We have this incredible capacity to normalize the unacceptable. Once the conspiracy is confirmed, it stops being scary and becomes just another feature of modern life. We joke about our FBI agent watching through our webcam. We've metabolized the surveillance state into meme culture. The deeper truth here is about how we decide what's believable. We're not rational evaluators of evidence. We're social creatures who determine truth based on consensus. If the consensus says something is crazy, we're wired to go along with that, even when the evidence suggests otherwise. It's not stupidity, it's survival psychology from when being ostracized from the group meant death. But in the modern world, that same mechanism gets exploited. Call something a conspiracy theory, and you've essentially inoculated the population against believing it, even when it's true. The people who see through this aren't necessarily smarter. They're often just more willing to tolerate social discomfort, to be the person everyone thinks is a bit off, to prioritize their own pattern recognition over group consensus. So, what does this mean for how we navigate the world now? It means calibrating your skepticism is one of the most important psychological skills you can develop. Not cynicism. That's just assuming everything is a lie, which is its own kind of cognitive laziness. But skepticism, real skepticism, means being willing to hold space for uncomfortable possibilities. It means not dismissing something just because it sounds outlandish or because doing so would be socially easier. It means understanding that powerful institutions have historically done deeply unethical things and then lied about them, and that's not ancient history. It's ongoing. The question isn't, am I paranoid? The question is, am I seeing patterns that others are dismissing because those patterns are uncomfortable? What's real and what's conspiracy? Sometimes the line is thinner than we want to believe. And the people who were right about MKUltra, Tuskegee, COINTELPRO, tobacco, and mass surveillance, they weren't prophets. They were just paying attention and willing to be called crazy for it. Maybe it's worth asking yourself, what are you dismissing right now because believing it would be too uncomfortable? What patterns are you refusing to see because seeing them would require changing how you understand the world? That's not paranoia talking. That's just being honest about how power actually works. If this hit different, there's more where this came from. Subscribe for more psychology that cuts through the comfortable lies we tell ourselves. Which conspiracy theory do you think we'll be talking about as confirmed fact in 10 years? Let me know in the comments.